The stagecoach wheel cracked clean through on a rock that shouldn't have been there, sending Natalie Everwood tumbling onto the dusty Texas ground for the third time that month. And as she lay there spitting dirt and watching her last remaining possessions scatter across the prairie, she wondered if maybe the whole town of Brownsville had been right about her after all. Bad luck, Natalie, they called her. Cursed, some whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Her father had died when she was 16, struck by lightning on a clear day. Her mother followed 2 years later from fever. The bakery they'd owned burned down the week after the funeral, taking with it every cent Natalie had inherited. She'd worked as a seamstress until the shop collapsed in a freak windstorm. Then, as a schoolteacher, until the schoolhouse roof caved in during her first week. No one was hurt, but no one wanted her around their children after that either. Now, at 23 years old, she was leaving Brownsville for good, heading north to Dallas where maybe, just maybe, no one would know her reputation. Except the stagecoach driver was looking at her like she'd personally summoned that rock onto the road, and the other passengers were already gathering their things, clearly unwilling to continue the journey with her aboard. "I'm real sorry, miss," the driver said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But I can't take you no further. Not after this. That wheel's going to cost me near 3 months' wages to replace, and we're stuck here until I can get another coach sent out." "But we're in the middle of nowhere," Natalie protested, looking around at the endless expanse of scrubland and distant mountains. "The nearest town must be 20 miles back." "That's your concern, not mine." The driver wouldn't meet her eyes. "Should have known better than to take you on in the first place." The other passengers nodded in agreement, already starting the long walk back toward Brownsville. One woman actually made a sign against evil as she passed. Natalie stood alone on the road, watching them disappear into the heat shimmer, her carpetbag at her feet containing everything she owned in the world, which amounted to 2 dresses, a hairbrush, and her mother's Bible. The sun was merciless overhead. It was August of 1876, and Texas seemed determined to bake everything under its sky into dust. Natalie picked up her bag and started walking north instead of south. She'd rather take her chances with the unknown than return to Brownsville and face all those knowing looks again. At least if she died out here, she'd die alone, without bringing misfortune to anyone else. She'd been walking for maybe an hour when she heard the sound of rushing water. A creek, probably fed by underground springs, cut through a small canyon to her left. Natalie stumbled toward it gratefully, her throat parched and her feet aching in their worn boots. She knelt at the water's edge and had just cupped her hands for a drink when the ground beneath her gave way. The bank collapsed, sending her sliding down into the creek with a splash and a scream. The water wasn't deep, but the current was stronger than it looked, and her heavy skirts tangled around her legs. She flailed, trying to find purchase, and her hand closed on something solid. She pulled herself toward it, coughing and sputtering, only to find herself face to face with a very dead cow, bloated and rotting in the shallows. Natalie screamed and let go, the current catching her again. She tumbled downstream, bashing her shoulder against a rock, her lungs burning. Just when she thought she might actually drown in 3 feet of water, something grabbed her. Not something, someone. A hand like iron closed around her arm and hauled her bodily out of the creek and onto the far bank. She lay gasping like a landed fish, water streaming from her clothes and hair. When she finally managed to look up, she found herself staring at the largest man she'd ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the sun. His arms, bare below rolled-up shirt sleeves, were corded with muscle that shifted under tanned skin as he moved. Dark hair fell past his collar, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. His eyes, a startling pale blue, studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch for reasons that had nothing to do with nearly drowning. "You all right?" His voice was deep, rough around the edges like he didn't use it much. "I think so," Natalie managed, sitting up and immediately wincing at the pain in her shoulder. "Thank you. I would have drowned if you hadn't pulled me out." "Doubt it. Water's not that deep." He crouched beside her anyway, those blue eyes scanning her for injuries. "But you might have bashed your head on a rock. That would have been bad." "Everything I do is bad," Natalie said without thinking, then immediately wished she could take it back. But she was exhausted and hurt, and so tired of fighting against whatever cosmic force had decided to make her life a series of disasters. The man tilted his head, studying her with what might have been curiosity. That's so. They call me Bad Luck Natalie back in Brownsville, with good reason. She gestured vaguely southward. The stagecoach wheel broke. The driver abandoned me. I fell in the creek, found a dead cow, nearly drowned. She laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. Just another Tuesday. Stagecoach wheel breaking's got nothing to do with luck, the man said practically. Got to do with poor maintenance and cheap parts. As for the rest, you're alive, aren't you? And you found water in August in Texas. Some might call that good luck. Natalie stared at him. No one had ever tried to reframe her disasters as anything other than proof of her cursed nature. Who are you? Xander Quinn. He stood and offered her his hand. Got a cabin about a mile upstream. You can dry off there, get your bearings. I couldn't impose, Natalie started to say, but he was already pulling her to her feet with an ease that suggested her weight was nothing to him. Not an imposition if I'm offering. Besides, you go walking around in wet clothes out here. You'll end up with sunstroke at best. Come on. He started walking, clearly expecting her to follow. Natalie hesitated for only a moment before grabbing her soggy carpet bag and hurrying after him. What choice did she have? And something about Xander Quinn made her feel safer than she had in years, despite only having known him for 5 minutes. They walked in silence for a while, following the creek upstream. Natalie tried not to stare at the way Xander moved, like a big cat, all controlled power and grace despite his size. He carried a rifle slung over his shoulder like it weighed nothing, and his eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings. A hunter, she thought, or maybe just a man who'd learned to be careful. What are you doing all the way out here? She finally asked. This is pretty far from anywhere. That's the point. He glanced back at her. Got tired of people. Mountains are better company. The mountains are at least 50 miles from here. Close enough. There might have been humor in his voice, but it was hard to tell through the gruffness. I trap in winter, hunt year-round, trade pelts and meat in town when I need supplies. Otherwise, I keep to myself. Sounds lonely. Sounds peaceful. He paused, waiting for her to catch up. You running from something? Or to something? Away from, Natalie admitted. Away from bad luck and people who think I'm cursed. I was heading to Dallas, hoping to start fresh. Dallas is a long walk from here. I noticed. This time she definitely heard amusement in his voice. How much money you got? The question was blunt, but not unkind. Natalie's cheeks heated. Enough for food for maybe a week if I'm careful. I was planning to find work in Dallas. Doing what? I don't know. Whatever someone will hire me for that I haven't already ruined. The bitterness crept back into her voice despite her best efforts. Xander stopped walking and turned to face her fully. In the harsh afternoon light, she could see scars on his forearms, the kind that came from hard living and harder work. His blue eyes were surprisingly gentle. Seems to me like you've had a run of bad circumstances, not bad luck. There's a difference. Tell that to the people of Brownsville. People believe what makes them feel better about their own troubles. Easier to blame a curse than admit sometimes things just happen. He started walking again. My cabin's just ahead. The cabin appeared through the scrub brush like a mirage. It was larger than Natalie expected, built solid from thick logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. A small corral held 2 horses and a mule, and she could see a smokehouse and what looked like a root cellar dug into the hillside. It wasn't fancy, but it was clearly well-maintained and thoughtfully made. It's nice, she said, meaning it. It's home. Xander pushed open the door and gestured her inside. There's a screen in the corner. You can change behind that. I'll heat some water so you can wash off that creek water properly. The interior was as well kept as the exterior. One large room served as living area and bedroom, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall and a rope bed with thick furs in the corner. A table and 2 chairs sat near the window, and shelves lined the walls, holding supplies and tools organized with military precision. Everything was clean. Everything had its place. Natalie had expected a bachelor's mess. This looked like someone who took pride in his space. She found her carpetbag had been set near the screen, and gratefully stepped behind it to peel off her wet clothes. Her other dress was damp but wearable. As she changed, she could hear Xander moving around, the clank of a pot, the crackle of kindling catching fire. When she emerged, he had a basin of warming water sitting near the hearth and was pointedly looking elsewhere. Thank you, she said quietly. For all of this. You didn't have to help me. Couldn't very well leave you out there. He finally looked at her and something flickered in his expression before it smoothed out again. You hungry? I've got stew from yesterday. I don't want to eat your food. Wasn't asking if you wanted to. Was asking if you're hungry. He was already ladling thick stew into a bowl. The smell made Natalie's stomach growl loudly enough that they both heard it. The stew was delicious, rich with meat and vegetables she couldn't quite identify, but that tasted like they'd been grown with care. They ate in companionable silence, and Natalie found herself relaxing for the first time in days, maybe weeks. There was something steady about Xander Quinn, something that made the constant anxiety she carried ease just a little. So what's the plan?" he asked when they'd both finished. "I can take you to the next town in the morning. It's called Esperanza, about 15 miles east. You might be able to catch another stage from there." "With what money?" Natalie laughed without humor. "The ticket to Dallas took nearly everything I had. I can't afford another one." "Then what were you planning to do?" "I don't know. Walk, I guess. Work along the way when I could find it." She met his eyes. "I know it's stupid. I know the chances of me actually making it to Dallas are probably close to zero, but I had to try. I couldn't stay in Brownsville anymore. I couldn't watch people cross the street to avoid me, couldn't stand the whispers." Xander was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table. "I might have another option." "What kind of option?" "I need help. Been meaning to expand, maybe run a proper trapline this year, but it's too much for one person, someone to help with the daily work. The preparing and stretching of hides, the preserving of meat, maybe some cooking and mending if you've got those skills." He paused. "You could stay here, work for me. I'd pay you fair wages and you'd have food and shelter while you figure out what you want to do next." Natalie stared at him. "You're offering me a job? After knowing me for all of 2 hours?" "Why not?" "Because I'm bad luck Natalie. Because terrible things happen around me. Because your cabin will probably burn down or get struck by lightning or cave in on both of us. Cabin stood for 5 years, through everything Texas weather could throw at it. I think it'll manage." Xander leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Look, I'm not fool enough to believe in curses. What I believe in is hard work and making your own fortune. You want a fresh start? Here's one. Take it or don't. Up to you." "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked away, a muscle working in his jaw. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be judged for things outside your control. Maybe because you've got determined eyes, and I respect that. Or maybe I just need the help and you need the work. Does the reason matter?" It didn't, Natalie realized. What mattered was that someone, for the first time in years, was offering her a genuine chance without fear or judgment or pity. Someone who looked at her and saw a person instead of a curse. "All right," she said. "I'll do it. I'll work for you." Something that might have been satisfaction crossed Xander's face. "Good. We'll work out the details in the morning. For tonight you take the bed. I'll sleep out on the porch." "I can't take your bed." "You will, because I'm twice your size and you couldn't stop me from sleeping on the porch even if you tried." He stood gathering the bowls. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start early." Natalie wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her fast. The bed looked impossibly inviting with its thick furs and soft blankets. She climbed in fully dressed and was asleep before Xander even finished banking the fire. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Pale dawn light filtered through the window, and Xander was already up, cooking breakfast at the fireplace. He moved with the easy efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, and Natalie found herself watching the play of muscles in his back and arms as he worked. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee's ready if you want it." "How did you know I was awake?" "Your breathing changed." He did look at her then, the corner of his mouth quirking up. Light sleeper, habit from living alone. Natalie poured herself coffee from the pot hanging over the fire. It was strong enough to strip paint, but it chased away the last of the sleep fog. "What do you need me to do?" "First, breakfast, then I'll show you around. Explain what needs doing." He handed her a plate piled with bacon and Johnny cakes. "After that, we'll see what you're good at." The tour of Xander's property took most of the morning. Besides the cabin, there was the corral with his 3 animals, a chicken coop she hadn't noticed the night before, and a surprisingly large garden tucked into a spot that caught good sun but was protected from the worst of the wind. He showed her his smokehouse, his store of pelts waiting to be traded, and the creek where he'd pulled her out yesterday. It's a lot of work, he admitted as they walked. More than I can keep up with properly on my own. That's why the garden's half overgrown, and I've got pelts from last winter still waiting to be sold. I focus on the hunting and trapping because that's what keeps me fed, but the rest suffers. I can help with that, Natalie said, ideas already forming. I'm good with gardens. My mother had one, and I know how to preserve food, how to sew and mend. I worked as a seamstress for 2 years. Until the shop collapsed in a windstorm. Building's fault, not yours. Xander's tone was matter-of-fact. Probably had a weak foundation or poor construction. Windstorms don't usually take down solid buildings. That's what the builder said, actually, but everyone else just saw me in bad luck. Everyone else was looking for an excuse. He stopped walking and faced her. Here's how this works, Natalie. You do your job, I do mine. Things break sometimes. That's life. A wheel cracks. A tool breaks. Weather turns bad. None of that's got anything to do with you unless you're directly causing it through carelessness or malice, and I don't figure you for either. Understand? Something tight in Natalie's chest loosened. I understand. Good. Now let's get to work. The days fell into a rhythm. Natalie threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised them both. She cleared the overgrown sections of garden and replanted where she could for a late summer crop. She mended Xander's clothes, which were well made but had clearly been repaired by someone with more determination than skill. She organized the cabin, tended the chickens, and learned how to stretch and prepare the pelts he brought in from his traps. Xander, for his part, was a man of few words but consistent actions. He woke before dawn every day, checked his trap lines, hunted when needed, and returned by late afternoon to help with whatever heavy work needed doing. He was patient when teaching her new skills, never mocking when she made mistakes, and quietly appreciative when she mastered something. They talked more as the weeks passed. Natalie learned that Xander had fought in the war, though he didn't say for which side, and she didn't ask. Afterward, he'd tried settling in various towns, but found he couldn't stand being around so many people anymore. Too much noise, too many expectations, too many memories. So he'd come out here 5 years ago and built his cabin and found the peace he'd been looking for. Don't you ever get lonely? Natalie asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was September now, and the heat had finally broken into something almost comfortable. Sometimes, Xander admitted. But lonely's better than feeling crowded and wrong all the time. Out here I can be myself, don't have to pretend to be something I'm not. What were you pretending to be? Civilized. He said it with a wry twist to his mouth. Turns out I'm not cut out for town living. Too rough around the edges. Natalie looked at him, at the size of him and the wildness that seemed barely contained beneath his controlled exterior. But she also saw the gentleness in how he handled the horses, the care he took with everything he built or mended, the way he'd never once made her feel afraid or unwelcome. I don't think you're rough, she said quietly. I think you're honest. Xander's blue eyes met hers, and something passed between them, something warm and electric that made Natalie's breath catch. He looked away first, clearing his throat. Should get some sleep. Early start tomorrow. Want to take those pelts to Esperanza, see about trading for winter supplies. Do you want me to come with you? He hesitated. If you want. Been putting off asking because I figured you might want to catch a stage from there. Continue on to Dallas like you planned. The thought hadn't even occurred to Natalie. Somewhere in the past month, this place had started to feel less like a stopping point and more like home. Or maybe it wasn't the place. Maybe it was the man. I'd like to come, she said, to help with the trading, but I'm not leaving. Not unless you want me to. I don't. The words came quick and definite. Want you to, I mean. You're good help. Good company. It wasn't a declaration of love, but the way Xander looked at her when he said it made Natalie's heart beat faster. She went to bed that night with a smile on her face for the first time in longer than she could remember. The trip to Esperanza took half a day. They loaded the mule with pelts and set out at dawn, riding the horses side by side across the scrubland. Xander had insisted Natalie learn to ride properly after the first week, saying it was a necessary skill out here. She'd been terrified at first, convinced the horse would throw her or bolt or somehow sense her bad luck and go mad. Instead, the gentle mare Xander put her on seemed perfectly content to follow his gelding wherever it went. Esperanza was small, maybe a few hundred people, built around a central plaza in the old Spanish style. They traded the pelts at the general store for winter supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition, and thick wool fabric for making warmer clothes. The store owner, a weathered man named Martinez, greeted Xander like an old friend. "About time you showed your face, Quinn. Thought maybe the wilderness finally got you." Then his eyes landed on Natalie and curiosity sparked. "And who's this?" "Natalie Everwood. She's working for me." "That so?" Martinez's eyebrows climbed. "Didn't figure you for hiring help." "Didn't figure I needed it until she showed up." Xander's hand came to rest on the small of Natalie's back, protective and possessive at once. "You have a problem with that?" "No problem at all. Just surprising is all." Martinez smiled at Natalie. "Welcome to Esperanza, miss. Always good to have new faces around." They bought supplies, loaded everything onto the mule, and were preparing to leave when a commotion broke out down the street. Raised voices, then a woman's scream. Xander's whole body went tense, and before Natalie could say anything, he was moving toward the noise. A crowd had gathered outside the cantina. In the center, a man had a woman by the arm, shaking her roughly while she tried to pull away. He was drunk, that much was obvious, and mean with it. "Please, just let me go," the woman was saying. "I don't want trouble." "You should have thought of that before you took my money," the man snarled. "I didn't take anything. I found your money on the floor after you dropped it. I was trying to return it." Xander pushed through the crowd like they weren't there. "Let her go." The drunk man turned, taking in Xander's size, and his face went pale, but he was too far gone to be smart about it. "This ain't your business, mountain man." "I'm making it my business." Xander's voice was quiet, but something in it made several people step back. "Let the lady go, now." "Or what?" The man never saw Xander move. One moment they were feet apart, the next Xander had the drunk's wrist in his hand, applying pressure that made the man yelp and release the woman. She stumbled back and Natalie was there to steady her. "Or you learn some manners the hard way," Xander said, still in that quiet, dangerous voice. "Your choice." "You broke my wrist." "It's sprained. Don't make me break it for real." Xander released him with a slight shove that sent the drunk sprawling. "Go sleep it off, and next time you drop your money, try saying thank you when someone returns it." The drunk scrambled away, muttering curses but not stupid enough to push his luck further. The crowd dispersed, and the woman Xander had helped turned to them with grateful tears in her eyes. "Thank you." He wouldn't let go, and no one was helping. She looked at Natalie. "Thank you both." "Are you all right?" Natalie asked. "I will be. My name's Rosa. I work at the cantina, cleaning mostly. That man's been causing trouble all week, but he spends enough money that my boss won't throw him out." "Your boss is a fool," Xander said bluntly. "Man like that's going to cause real damage sooner or later." Rosa smiled weakly. "Maybe. But it's work, and I need the money. I've got 3 children to feed." Something passed across Xander's face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out several coins, pressing them into Rosa's hand. "For your trouble. And if he bothers you again, you tell him Xander Quinn will hear about it. That might make him think twice." Rosa stared at the money, then at Xander, then burst into tears. "Bless you. Truly. Bless you both." They rode home in silence. Natalie kept glancing at Xander, seeing him in a new light. The way he'd moved to help without hesitation, the quiet authority in his voice, the gentleness with which he'd given Rosa that money despite not having much himself. "That was kind," she finally said. "What you did back there." Xander shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Wasn't right what he was doing. Someone had to step in." "But you did. You didn't have to, but you did." Natalie urged her mare closer until they were riding knee to knee. "You're a good man, Xander Quinn." "Just a man trying to do right when I can." He looked at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "Most of the time, I just want to be left alone. But seeing someone hurt when I could help, can't abide that. That's what makes you good." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, but something had shifted. Natalie caught Xander looking at her more often, his gaze lingering before he'd catch himself and look away. And she found herself watching him too, noticing the strength in his hands, the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the rare smiles that transformed his stern face into something almost boyish. That night, as they worked together preparing dinner, their hands brushed reaching for the same pot. Xander pulled back like he'd been burned, but not before Natalie felt the calluses on his palms, the warmth of his skin. Her heart hammered in her chest. "Sorry," he muttered. "Don't be." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Natalie saw hunger in his eyes that had nothing to do with food, but he was holding himself in check, rigid with control. "Natalie," he started, then stopped. "I should tell you something." "What?" "I'm not good with words, never have been, but I need you to know that having you here, it's been good. Better than good. You've made this place feel less like just a cabin and more like a home." He took a breath. "And I've come to care for you. More than I probably should, given I'm your employer, and you might just be being kind because I gave you a place to stay." Natalie's heart soared. "You think I'm just being kind? Aren't you?" She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his large frame. "Xander Quinn, I haven't thought about Dallas in weeks. I wake up every morning grateful to be here, and it's not because of the cabin or the work or the safety. It's because of you." His hand came up slowly, carefully, like she might bolt. His fingers brushed her cheek, gentle despite their size and strength. "You mean that?" "Every word." "Then can I kiss you? Because I've been wanting to for weeks now, and it's been driving me half crazy." Natalie's answer was to rise on her toes and press her lips to his. The kiss started gentle, almost tentative, but it didn't stay that way. Xander's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest, and Natalie melted into his strength. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was something to be cherished, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Been wanting to do that since the day I pulled you out of that creek," Xander admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "Looked up and saw you gasping like a fish, and thought you were the prettiest thing I'd ever seen, even soaking wet and covered in creek mud." Natalie laughed, giddy with joy. "I looked terrible. You looked alive. You looked determined. You looked like everything I didn't know I needed." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Your luck changed the day you met me, Natalie Everwood. Because mine sure as hell did." They held each other as the sun set, and Natalie felt something settle in her chest. Peace, belonging, hope. All the things she thought she'd lost forever. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. Xander courted her in his own way, which meant showing her his favorite spots in the surrounding countryside, teaching her to shoot so she could defend herself if needed, and leaving wildflowers on the table for her to find. Natalie cooked his favorite meals, mended his clothes with extra care, and caught him watching her with such open affection that it made her blush. They kissed often, stealing moments throughout the day when work allowed. Xander was always careful, always respectful, never pushing for more than Natalie was ready to give. But the desire was there, building between them like a storm gathering strength. One night in late October, as they sat by the fire, Xander cleared his throat. "I want to ask you something, but I don't want you to feel pressured. All right? Would you consider staying here permanently? Not as hired help, but as my wife?" He rushed on before she could answer. "I know I'm not much. Just a mountain man with a cabin and some horses. Don't have fancy things or a fine house in town. But I can promise you'll never go hungry or cold, and I'll work every day of my life to make you happy. I love you, Natalie. Don't think I knew what love was before you, but I know now. And it's you." Natalie felt tears streaming down her face. "You think you're not much? Xander, you're everything. You saw me when everyone else saw a curse. You gave me hope when I had none. You made me feel safe and wanted and valued for the first time in years." She took his hand, large and scarred and perfect. "Yes, 1,000 times yes, I'll marry you." Xander's smile was brilliant. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that left them both shaking. "I'll take you to Esperanza tomorrow. We'll find a preacher, do this proper." "I don't need proper. I just need you. You'll have me. For the rest of my life, you'll have me." They married 2 days later in Esperanza's small church. Martinez stood as witness, along with Rosa and a few other locals who'd befriended Xander over the years. Natalie wore her good dress, cleaned and mended until it looked almost new, and Xander wore his best shirt, his hair brushed back and his beard neatly trimmed. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Xander kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. The small crowd cheered, and for the first time in her life, Natalie felt surrounded by genuine good wishes instead of suspicion and fear. They spent their wedding night in the cabin, and Xander was as gentle and patient as Natalie had known he would be. He worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, taking his time despite his obvious need, making sure she was ready before he finally made her his in truth. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed, skin to skin, hearts beating in sync. "No more bad luck," Xander murmured against her hair. "From now on, we make our own fortune." "I already have all the fortune I need," Natalie said, tracing the scars on his chest. "I have you." Winter came hard that year. Snow fell heavy in the mountains and even reached down into the lower elevations where their cabin stood. But they were prepared. The root cellar was full, the smokehouse packed with preserved meat, and they had each other to stay warm through the long, cold nights. Xander continued his trapline through the worst of the weather, sometimes gone for days at a time. Natalie worried every time he left, but he always came back, ice in his beard and pelts on his back, and the relief she felt seeing him safe made her realize anew how much she loved him. In February, she realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She'd always wanted children, but what if her bad luck extended to them? What if something went wrong? She spent a week agonizing over how to tell Xander until finally he cornered her one evening. "Something's wrong. You've been quiet, picking at your food. Are you sick? Do I need to take you to Esperanza to see the doctor?" "I'm not sick." Natalie took a breath. "I'm pregnant." Xander went very still. "Pregnant," he repeated. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. All the signs are there." "That's good, right? You want children?" "I do, but Xander, what if something goes wrong? What if my bad luck hurts the baby?" "Stop." Xander pulled her into his arms, his voice firm. "There is no bad luck. There never was. You're a strong, healthy woman, and we're going to have a strong, healthy baby. I won't hear anything different." "But what if?" "No what ifs. We're in this together, you and me, and whatever comes, we'll handle it." He pulled back to look at her, his blue eyes fierce. "You're going to be an amazing mother. I know it. Believe it." His certainty steadied her. Natalie nodded, letting his confidence become her own. "All right, we're having a baby." A smile spread across Xander's face, transforming it. "We're having a baby," he echoed, wonder in his voice. Then he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared every animal within a mile and swept Natalie off her feet, spinning her around until she was laughing helplessly. "Xander, put me down." "Never. I'm never putting you down." But he did, gently, and knelt before her. His large hands spread across her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I'm going to love you so much, both of you." Natalie ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with emotion. This man, this beautiful, fierce, gentle man was hers. They were building a life together, a family. And for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, her luck really had changed. The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Natalie's constant anxiety. Xander fussed over her like a mother hen, trying to take over all her chores until she finally had to threaten to hit him with a wooden spoon to make him stop. "I'm pregnant, not an invalid," she insisted. "I can still gather eggs and tend the garden." "You shouldn't be lifting heavy things." "Then don't let me lift heavy things, but I need to keep busy, Xander. I'll go mad just sitting around all day." They compromised. Natalie continued with the lighter chores while Xander took over anything that required significant effort. He also started expanding the cabin, adding a second room that would serve as a nursery. Natalie watched him work, muscles straining as he hauled logs and hammered boards, and felt her heart swell with love. In May, when the baby was due any day, Xander rode to Esperanza and came back with Rosa. The woman had experience as a midwife, he explained, and he wanted someone who knew what they were doing when the time came. Natalie could have kissed him for his thoughtfulness. Rosa stayed in the newly finished nursery, helping with preparations and keeping Natalie company while Xander worked. The two women became fast friends, Rosa confided that her eldest son had started working at the general store, bringing in enough money that she'd been able to quit the cantina. "Thanks to your husband's advice and the stake he gave me," Rosa said. "He told me to hold on to that money, use it to help my son get started with something better than bar work. Changed our lives, that did." "That's Xander," Natalie said softly. "He sees what needs doing and does it." The baby came on a warm evening in late May. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Natalie's old fears came rushing back. But Xander stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, and when their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, Natalie saw tears streaming down her husband's face. "A boy," Rosa announced, placing the squirming bundle on Natalie's chest. "Strong and healthy. Congratulations." Natalie looked down at her son, at his red face and dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air, and felt something inside her heal. This perfect little person was hers. Theirs. And nothing bad had happened. No complications, no disasters, no proof of any curse. Just a healthy baby and a husband looking at them both like they'd hung the moon. "He's perfect," Xander breathed, carefully touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby immediately gripped it, and Xander's face crumpled. "So perfect. What should we name him?" They'd discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at her son, Natalie knew. "Samuel, after my father." "Samuel Quinn." Xander tested it out. "I like it. Strong name for a strong boy." He leaned down and kissed Natalie gently. "Thank you. For him. For everything. For giving me a family when I thought I'd always be alone." "We're in this together," Natalie echoed his words from months ago. "Always." Rosa stayed for a week, helping Natalie learn to nurse and care for the baby. Samuel was indeed strong, growing quickly and sleeping well between feedings. Xander was utterly besotted, holding his son every chance he got and talking to him constantly, despite the baby obviously not understanding a word. "Gotta teach him about the world," Xander explained when Natalie teased him about it. "He needs to know about trapping and hunting and how to read the weather. Might as well start now." "He's a week old." "Never too early to learn." Life settled into a new rhythm, one that revolved around Samuel's needs but felt right in a way Natalie had never experienced. She'd expected motherhood to be hard, and it was, but it was also joyful in ways she hadn't anticipated. Watching Xander with their son, seeing this big, rough man become so gentle and patient, filled her with a contentment that went bone deep. The summer passed peacefully. Xander's trapping and hunting kept them supplied with meat and furs to trade. The garden produced bountifully under Natalie's care. Samuel grew fat and happy, learning to smile and laugh and eventually to sit up on his own. They took him to Esperanza once a month so Rosa could see him, and every time people marveled at how healthy and well-adjusted he was. "You're a natural," Rosa told Natalie during one visit. "Both of you are. That's a lucky baby to have parents who love him so much." Lucky. The word no longer made Natalie flinch, because it was true. Samuel was lucky. They all were. Not because of some mystical force, but because they'd found each other and built something real and lasting. When Samuel was 6 months old, Xander came home from checking his trapline with news. "Ran into a surveyor out past Eagle Ridge. Says they're planning to build a town there. Maybe a train depot eventually. Going to need supplies, services, could be opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" "We've got more pelts than we can trade in Esperanza, and your preserves and dried goods are better than anything sold in the general store. If we could get a regular supply route to this new town, we might be able to expand, make real money." It was the most ambitious Natalie had ever heard Xander talk. "You want to grow the business?" "I want to provide for my family. For future children, if we're blessed with more." He crouched beside where she sat with Samuel. "But only if you want to. I'm happy with what we have now. I just thought maybe we could do more. Be more." Natalie considered. The idea of being part of something growing, something hopeful, appealed to her, and it would be nice to have more financial security, especially if they had more children. "Let's try it. See where it goes." They started small, making trips to the new town, which had been named Progress, every few weeks with loaded mules. The workers there were hungry for anything other than their own cooking, and Natalie's preserved vegetables, smoked meat, and baked goods sold out almost immediately. Word spread, and soon they were getting orders in advance. Xander hired 2 young men from Esperanza to help with the trap lines and heavy work, which freed up time for the trading business. The cabin became a hub of activity, with Natalie cooking and preserving from dawn to dusk, while Xander managed the hunting and logistics. Samuel spent his days in a sling on his mother's back or playing on a blanket near where they worked. By the time Samuel turned 1, they'd expanded enough that Xander built a second, larger cabin to use as a workhouse. By his 2nd birthday, they had steady contracts with Progress in 2 other nearby towns and were making more money than they'd ever dreamed possible. "You brought me luck," Xander said one evening as they watched Samuel toddle around the yard chasing chickens. "The day you fell in that creek, my whole life changed." "I thought there was no such thing as luck," Natalie teased. "There's not, but there is love and hard work and faith, and you brought me all 3. He pulled her close. "Been thinking about something." "What?" "All that talk in Brownsville about you being cursed, about bad luck following you. Seems to me it was the opposite. You were just waiting for the right place, the right person. And once you found them, everything fell into place." Natalie thought about it, about all the disasters that had driven her from Brownsville, the deaths, the fires, the collapses. At the time, they'd seemed like proof of something fundamentally wrong with her. But looking back now with the perspective of time and happiness, she could see what Xander saw. Just bad circumstances. Tragic, yes, but not supernatural. Not her fault. "Maybe you're right," she said slowly. "Maybe I just needed to get out of Brownsville to find where I belonged." "No, you did." Xander kissed the top of her head. "You belonged here, with me, all along. Just took some time to find your way." 2 months later, Natalie realized she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only joy. She told Xander immediately, and his reaction was just as enthusiastic as the first time, complete with the spinning and the whooping that sent Samuel into peals of delighted laughter. Their daughter was born the following spring, a tiny, perfect thing with Natalie's green eyes and Xander's dark hair. They named her Lily, and if Samuel had been a good baby, Lily was even better. She slept through the night within weeks and had a calm, sweet disposition that made everyone who met her fall in love. "2 perfect children," Xander said one night, sitting in the rocking chair he'd built with both children asleep in his arms. "How did I get so lucky?" "Hard work and faith," Natalie quoted back at him with a smile, "and maybe a little bit of love." "A lot of love." He looked up at her, his blue eyes soft. "More than I knew what to do with at first, but I'm learning." The years flowed by like the creek behind their cabin, steady and sure. Samuel grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to trap and hunt and read the signs of nature. Lily was quieter, happier helping her mother in the house and garden, though she had a stubborn streak that came out when least expected. The business continued to thrive. Progress grew into a real town, and the train depot Xander had heard about actually materialized. They bought a wagon to make the larger hauls easier and eventually built a small shop in Progress itself where Natalie's goods could be sold year-round. They hired more help, including Rose's 2 sons, and became respected members of the community. People in Progress never knew about Bad Luck Natalie. They just knew Natalie Quinn, the hard-working woman with the kind smile and the mountain man husband who'd do anything for his family. And if word ever filtered up from Brownsville about the cursed girl who'd left years ago, no one connected her to this confident, happy woman. When Samuel was 8 and Lily 6, they made their first family trip back to Esperanza for the town's harvest festival. It had grown over the years, attracting people from all the surrounding communities. As they walked through the busy plaza, Natalie holding Lily's hand while Samuel rode on Xander's shoulders, she felt a swell of pride. This was her family. This was her life. And it was good. Natalie? Natalie Everwood? She turned to find a woman staring at her in shock. It took a moment to place the face, but then recognition clicked. Martha Dobbins from Brownsville. They'd been friendly once before Natalie's parents died and the disaster started mounting. "It's Natalie Quinn now," she said with a smile. "Hello, Martha. It's been a long time." "Quinn? Martha's eyes went to Xander, took in his size and obvious strength, then dropped to the children. "You're married? With children?" 10 years now. This is my husband Xander, and our children Samuel and Lily." "But I thought that is. Everyone said," Martha floundered, clearly trying to reconcile the bad luck girl she remembered with the thriving woman before her. "Everyone said I was cursed," Natalie finished for her. "I remember. Turns out they were wrong." "I'll say," Martha was still staring, "you look wonderful. Happy." "I am happy, very happy." Natalie squeezed Xander's free hand. "We have a good life, better than I ever imagined possible." They talked for a few more minutes, Martha filling her in on news from Brownsville. The town had struggled in recent years, several businesses failing, people moving away. Natalie listened with sympathy but no regret. That part of her life was behind her, and she had no desire to revisit it. When they parted ways, Xander looked down at her. "You all right?" "Better than all right. Seeing her just reminded me how far I've come, how much I've changed." Natalie lifted Samuel down from his father's shoulders so she could hold Xander's hand properly. "Your luck changed the day you met me," you said, "but mine changed too. Changed completely." "Our luck," Xander corrected. "We made it together." That night, after the children were asleep and they lay in bed in the room they'd rented for the festival, Natalie traced patterns on Xander's chest. "Do you ever regret it? Taking in a strange woman you pulled out of a creek?" "Best decision I ever made." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Natalie. You and our children. I'd do it all again 1,000 times over. Even the part where I nearly drowned? Even that. Because it brought you to me." He rolled over so he was looking down at her, his expression serious. "I love you. More now than even on the day we married. And I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. That's just how it works." Natalie pulled him down for a kiss, pouring everything she felt into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered, "Take me home soon, back to our cabin, our life." "Tomorrow," Xander promised. "We'll leave at dawn." They kept that promise, loading up the wagon at first light and heading back to their homestead. Samuel and Lily chattered excitedly about everything they'd seen at the festival, while Natalie and Xander shared contented smiles over their heads. The years continued their steady march. The children grew, the business flourished, and the love between Natalie and Xander only deepened. They added a third child, another boy they named Thomas, and then a fourth, a daughter called Hope. The cabin complex grew with the family, spreading out into a proper homestead with multiple buildings and hired hands who lived in a bunkhouse Xander built. Samuel took over much of the hunting and trapping when he turned 16, proving to have his father's skill and patience. Lily managed the progress shop with steady competence, her head for numbers making her invaluable. Thomas showed an interest in carpentry, apprenticing with a builder in Esperanza. And Hope, the baby, charmed everyone she met with her infectious laughter and boundless energy. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Xander surprised Natalie with a trip. He'd arranged for Samuel and Lily to watch the younger children and had planned a week away, just the two of them. They rode out into the mountains, following trails Xander had scouted years ago, but never shared with anyone. He brought her to a meadow high in the peaks, where wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion and a small cabin stood waiting. "Built it last year," he explained. "Thought we might need a place to get away sometimes, just us." Natalie walked around the cabin, taking in the care evident in every detail. It was smaller than their main home, just one room, but it had a fireplace and a bed and a window that looked out over the valley below. "It's perfect. Wanted to give you something special, something that was just ours." Xander came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. 20 years, Natalie. 20 years since I pulled you out of that creek. Best 20 years of my life." She leaned back against his chest. "Do you remember what you said about my luck changing?" "I remember. You were right. Everything changed that day, but it wasn't just luck. It was you. Your kindness, your faith in me, your love. You saw me when everyone else saw a curse. I saw a woman who needed help and offered it. Rest of it just fell into place." His arms tightened. "But I'm glad I was there. Glad you fell in that creek right when I was nearby. Glad you said yes to staying, to marrying me, to building this life. Can't imagine any of it without you." They spent the week in the mountain cabin, just the two of them for the first time in years. They talked and laughed and made love and simply enjoyed being together without the demands of children or business. It was restorative in a way Natalie hadn't realized she needed. On their last night, as they lay watching stars through the window, Xander said, "Been thinking about the future." "What about it?" "The children are mostly grown now. Business practically runs itself. We've built something good, something that'll last beyond us." He paused. "What do you want to do with the rest of our lives?" Natalie considered. "More of this. More time together. Maybe travel some. See the places we've always talked about. Watch our children build their own lives and families. Grow old together." "Sounds perfect to me." Xander kissed her temple. "Long as I'm with you, I don't much care what we do." They kept that promise, too. As the children reached adulthood and started their own paths, Natalie and Xander gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the business. They traveled to San Francisco to see the ocean and to Denver to watch the mountains give way to plains. They visited Thomas at his workshop in Esperanza and Lily at the shop in Progress. They spoiled Samuel's children and waited eagerly for news of more grandchildren. Through it all, they remained devoted to each other. Xander's hair went gray, and his body finally started to show the effects of decades of hard living, but he was still strong, still capable. Natalie's face lined with age, but she moved with the same grace, still worked in her garden, still filled their home with laughter and love. On a warm summer evening when they were both in their 60s, they sat on the porch of their original cabin, watching the sun set over the scrubland. 4 grandchildren played in the yard, their happy shouts drifting on the breeze. Samuel and his wife were visiting, along with Lily and her husband. Thomas and Hope were due to arrive tomorrow with their families. "Full house," Xander observed with satisfaction. "Just how I like it." "Remember when it was just us?" Natalie asked. "When this cabin felt so big and empty?" "Hard to imagine now." He took her hand, his thumb tracing over her wedding ring, worn smooth by decades. "You filled it up. Filled my whole life up. Don't know what I'd have become if you hadn't fallen in that creek." "Probably exactly what you were. A good man living a quiet life." "A lonely man," Xander corrected. "Maybe a good one, but definitely lonely. You changed that. Changed everything." He looked at her, his blue eyes still as sharp as ever. "They said you had bad luck. Said you were cursed. But the way I see it, I'm the luckiest man alive because of you." Natalie's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Xander Quinn. I have loved you since the day you pulled me out of that creek and didn't flinch at the word curse. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Xander said firmly. "I was just existing before you. You taught me how to live." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The grandchildren's laughter mixed with the evening birdsong, and from inside the cabin came the sounds of their children preparing dinner. "This is everything," Natalie said softly. "Everything I never let myself dream of having. A family, a home, a life full of love and purpose. And it all started with a broken stagecoach wheel and a chance encounter." "Not chance," Xander disagreed. "Fate. Had to be fate that put you on that road, that made me go check my traps along that particular stretch of creek. Had to be something bigger than us that brought us together." "You don't believe in fate." "Didn't used to, but how else do you explain it? Out of everywhere you could have gone, everything that could have happened, you ended up exactly where I could find you. If that's not fate, I don't know what is." Natalie smiled. "Maybe you're right. Maybe some things are just meant to be." They were called in for dinner eventually, surrounded by the noise and chaos of family. The evening stretched long, full of stories and laughter, children begging for one more cookie, grandchildren fighting sleep. When everyone finally settled down for the night, Natalie and Xander retreated to their bedroom, to the privacy of their space. "Happy?" Xander asked as they prepared for bed. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Natalie replied. "My luck didn't just change the day I met you. My whole life began that day. Everything before was just waiting for this." Xander pulled her close, and they fell asleep wrapped around each other as they had for the past 40 years, 2 people who'd found in each other everything they'd been missing. The years rolled on, as years do. More grandchildren arrived, then great-grandchildren. The business passed fully to the next generation, but continued to thrive under their care. Natalie and Xander aged gracefully, their love never diminishing, only growing richer and deeper with time. When Natalie finally passed, quietly in her sleep at the age of 78, she went with a smile on her face and Xander's hand in hers. He followed her 6 months later, unable to bear a world without her in it. They were buried side by side on the hillside overlooking their homestead, under a pair of oak trees Xander had planted the year they were married. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to remember them, to tell stories of the mountain man and the woman everyone had called cursed. They spoke of love that lasted a lifetime, of hard work and dedication, of building something from nothing and leaving a legacy that would endure for generations. "She had bad luck," they said, Samuel told his grandchildren that day. "But my father always said her luck changed the day she met him, and I think they were both right. She had bad luck until she found good fortune, and that good fortune was love, was family, was a life lived fully and without regret." The children scattered wildflowers on the graves, and as the family walked back down the hill toward the homestead, they could almost feel the presence of Natalie and Xander still there, still watching over the land they'd loved and the family they'd built. The homestead remained in the family for generations, passed down through Samuel's line. The cabin where it all began was preserved as a reminder of where they'd come from, of two people who'd found each other against all odds and built an empire of love. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings, people claimed to see two figures sitting on the porch of that original cabin, a massive man and a smaller woman, sitting close together and watching the sunset, well, who was to say it wasn't Xander and Natalie? Still together, still in love, still proving that sometimes the worst luck can lead to the greatest fortune of all. The story of Bad Luck Natalie and the mountain man who loved her became part of local legend. People told it as a reminder that circumstances don't define you, that love can change everything, that sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to alter the course of your entire life. And in Progress, in Esperanza, in all the towns and places their influence had reached, the name Quinn became synonymous with hard work, dedication, and enduring love, a testament to what two people could build when they refused to accept the labels others placed on them and chose instead to forge their own path. The creek where they met still flows, cutting through the scrubland on its way to join the river. The rock that had seemed like such a disaster, that broken stagecoach wheel, had actually been the beginning of everything. And the cabin still stands, maintained lovingly by descendants who understand that some places are sacred, some stories are worth preserving, some love is truly eternal. In the end, luck had nothing to do with it. Hard work, faith, and love built the Quinn legacy. But it started with a man who looked at a woman everyone else had written off and saw instead someone worth saving, someone worth loving, someone who would spend the rest of her life proving that she'd been worth it all along. And in saving her, Xander had saved himself, finding purpose and joy and completeness in the last place he'd expected to look. That was the real story. Not about curses or luck, good or bad, but about two people who found each other when they needed it most and chose to build something beautiful together. About a love that conquered doubt and fear and reputation. About family and legacy and the power of seeing someone truly for who they are. And every generation of Quinns grew up hearing that story, learning from it, carrying it forward. A reminder that your past doesn't have to define your future, that love really can change everything, and that sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the first day of something incredible. Natalie Everwood's luck changed the day she met Xander Quinn. But more than that, her life began. Really, truly began. And it was a life worth living, worth remembering, worth celebrating for all the years that followed and all the generations yet to come.